A woman is walking into a small town at the start of the barley harvest, and the whole street is stopping to stare. 10 years ago she left this place with a husband, 2 sons, and everything she owned. Today she is coming back with the clothes on her body and a road behind her that holds 3 graves. The women of the town press in close, and one of them finally says the thing everyone is thinking. Is this Naomi? And Naomi answers with something nobody is ready for. She changes her own name, right there in the street. Do not call me Naomi, she says. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Empty. Hold on to that word, because this entire story turns on it. Because, standing one step to her left, close enough to touch, covered in the same road dust, is a young foreign widow that nobody in that crowd has bothered to greet. Naomi cannot see it yet, and she would not believe you if you told her. But the future she just pronounced dead is standing right beside her, breathing hard from the journey, waiting to be noticed. The Book of Ruth is 4 chapters long. You can read it in 15 minutes. And inside those 4 little chapters are 4 turning points, 4 hinges where everything swings. And not one of them involves a miracle. No sea splits. No fire falls. Heaven never says a single word out loud. Yet by the last page, a family that was mathematically finished is holding the future of a nation in its hands. If you have ever looked down at your own 2 hands and called them empty, this story was written for you, but it does not start at the gate. It starts 10 years earlier, in this same town, in the year the house of bread ran out of bread. There is a man sitting in his car in a grocery store parking lot at 4 in the afternoon, and he cannot make himself drive home. He is 58 years old. On the passenger seat next to him is a cardboard box, and in the box is a small cactus, a coffee mug, and a framed photo of his family at the lake. 23 years with the company. And this morning, it all fit into one box that a security guard watched him carry to the elevator. He is not crying. He is doing math. That is what a man does in that parking lot. Savings divided by mortgage. Severance divided by groceries. How many months? He runs the numbers again, as if they might come out different the 3rd time. And through the windshield, he watches ordinary people push carts full of food to their cars. And he wonders how the world can look so normal on the day he's stopped working. There is a particular silence that settles over a man when the place that was supposed to feed his family stops feeding it. It is quiet in the car. It is quiet all the way down. 3,000 years ago, that same silence settled over an entire town. The town sits in the hill country of Judah, about 6 miles south of Jerusalem, and its name is a small poem, Bethlehem. In Hebrew, Bethlehem, house of bread. This is farm country, grain country, the kind of place where the whole calendar bends around planting and harvest, where the sound of the millstone is the sound of everything being okay. And the Book of Ruth opens with a single, terrible sentence. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. Sit with the irony for a second, because the original audience certainly did. The house of bread has no bread. The millstones have gone quiet. The threshing floors are swept and bare. Mothers are thinning the soup and lying to their children about it. And every morning the men walk out and look at fields that have nothing to say. And notice when this is happening, in the days when the judges ruled. If you know your Bible, that phrase should raise the hair on your arms, because the book of Judges ends with one of the bleakest lines in all of Scripture. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is not the golden age. This is a lawless, violent, every man for himself chapter of history. And now, on top of all of it, the food is gone. In that town, in that famine, there is a man named Elimelech, and his name is the second irony on the first page, because Elimelech means, "My God is king." Here is a man carrying a sermon around in his own name, watching his two boys get thinner. So he makes a decision, and before we go one step further, I want to guard you against judging him too quickly, because it is easy to sit in a comfortable chair 3,000 years later and grade a starving father's choices. Elimelech looks east, across the Dead Sea, to the high plateau of Moab, where the rain still falls and the fields are still green, and he takes his wife, Naomi, and his two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and he leaves the promised land to keep his family alive. Understand what Moab meant to an Israelite ear. This was not a neutral country next door. Moab and Israel had history, old wounds, old wars, old contempt running in both directions. Going to Moab was crossing more than a border. It was crossing a line in the family memory, and the text says they went to sojourn there, which means to stay for a while, a temporary arrangement, just until the rain comes back home. But you know how that goes. You have lived that. The temporary thing that quietly becomes the permanent thing. The text slips it in almost without a sound. They went to sojourn, and a few verses later, they remained there. The tent becomes a house. The visit becomes a decade. They escaped the famine, and Moab was about to take from them far more than hunger ever could. The narrator of Ruth tells the next part the way grief actually feels. In short, brutal strokes with no explanation attached. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. That is the whole verse. No cause, no deathbed scene, no comfort. One sentence. And Naomi is a widow in a foreign country. Her two sons marry Moabite women. One is named Orpah, the other is named Ruth. Remember both of those names. And then the text says they lived there about 10 years. And inside that little phrase is a silence you are meant to notice. Because in 10 years of marriage, the narrator records no children. Known, in that world, in that culture, 10 years of empty cradles was its own slow-motion grief, a wound that renewed itself every single month. And then the hammer falls twice more. Mahlon dies. Chilion dies. Scripture does not tell us how, and it is worth pausing on the names, because Hebrew parents sometimes name children after hopes, and these names read like omens. Mahlon comes from a root that means sickness. Chilion comes from a root that means wasting away, coming to an end. Whether the famine had already marked those boys when they were born, we cannot say. What we can say is what the text says. And the text is careful here. In a way, we need to be careful too. It never says God struck them down as punishment for going to Moab. Preachers have said that for centuries. The Bible does not. The Book of Ruth simply lets 3 men die and refuses to explain it, which is exactly how death arrives in your life and mine. Unexplained, uninterpreted, just gone. So now, pull the camera back and look at what is left. 3 women standing in the land of Moab beside 3 graves, an old widow and 2 young ones. No husbands, no song, no land they can farm, no income, no protection. And here is where you need to understand the ancient math, because we hear the word widow today and think of grief. In Naomi's world, widow was not only a grief, it was an economic sentence. There was no life insurance. There was no pension. A woman's security was a chain with exactly 3 links. Her father, then her husband, then her sons. And every link in Naomi's chain was now underground. A widow with no sons was a woman standing outside the entire architecture of survival. When Naomi looks at her life, she is not being dramatic. She is being accurate. The famine took her homeland. Moab took her husband. Time took her hope of grandchildren. And then death came back for both of her boys. She did not just lose the people she loved. This is the thing about certain losses that nobody warns you about. She lost the entire version of the future that was built around them. Every plan she had ever made had one of those 3 men standing in it somewhere. The house she would grow old in. The grandchildren who would carry water for her when her back gave out. The name, Elimelech's name, going on in Bethlehem after she was gone. All of it was designed around people who no longer existed. Some losses take a person from you, and some losses take the whole blueprint. So let me ask you the question this chapter has been walking toward, and take your time with it. What did you bury in your Moab? I am not asking who. I am asking what. Which version of your life went into the ground alongside somebody you loved? Or some marriage? Or some career? Or some diagnosis? The future where the 2 of you retired by the water? The future where the kids called every Sunday? The future where your body cooperated? Somewhere along the way, most of us have stood at a graveside that had no headstone on it, because what we were burying was a future, and futures do not get funerals. Nobody brings a casserole for the life that was supposed to happen. Naomi is standing in that exact place. 3 graves, no blueprint, nothing on the horizon. And then, into the darkest paragraph of this whole story, the narrator drops one small sentence, and it lands like a seed falling on stone. Word reached her in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. That is all. A rumor, carried across the hills by travelers. Somebody heard from somebody that back home, in Bethlehem, there was bread again. Now, a rumor of bread is a pitiful thing to offer a woman who has lost everything. It is too small to be called hope. You cannot rebuild a life on it. But watch her, because it turns out a rumor of bread is too small to hope on, and just barely big enough to stand up for. There is a woman driving on the interstate tonight, and up ahead, glowing green in the dark, is the exit sign for her hometown. She knows this exit the way you know your own signature. 2 lanes, a gas station on the right, then 11 miles of county road to the square where everybody knows her mother's name. She has passed this exit 4 times this year, and 4 times She has watched it slide by in the mirror. Because the reunion is not the problem, and the drive is not the problem. The problem is that the people back there knew her before the divorce, before the bankruptcy, before the year that took the shine off of her. Going back means standing in the produce aisle while somebody's eyes do the math on you, measuring the distance between who you were when you left and what is left of you now. Going back is one of the most underrated acts of courage in the world, because back there, you cannot perform. Back there, they have the before picture. Naomi has the before picture problem times 1,000. In Bethlehem, they remember her full, a husband with land, 2 sons, a name that meant something. To walk back through that gate is to let the whole town measure the wreckage, and she gets up and goes anyway. Here is the first turning point of this story, and I need you to see how unimpressive it looks, because that is the whole point of it. The verse says that Naomi arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard that the Lord had visited his people and given them bread. That is turning point number 1. Not a vision, not an angle, not a healed heart. A bitter, grieving, hollowed out woman hears there is food somewhere and stands up. Let me be honest with you about her condition, because the Bible is honest about it. Naomi is not returning in faith. She is returning in hunger. This same woman, a few verses from now, will stand in the middle of town and announce that the Almighty has made her life bitter, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against her. That is her theology on this road. She believes God is her opponent. She is not walking toward Bethlehem singing. She is walking toward Bethlehem because there is bread there, and there is nothing left for her anywhere else. And heaven works with that. Please do not miss this, because somebody watching needs it tonight. The first step of every restoration in your life will almost never look like restoration. It will not feel spiritual. It will not come with music. It will look like a broken person, still angry, still confused about God, doing the next necessary thing, getting up, making the call, filling out the application, driving back. God can steer a grieving woman who is moving, what even God will not do, because he will not override the human heart, is force the woman who stays face down in Moab. Naomi stood up. Everything else in this book, the fields, the harvest, the wedding, the child, the king who comes generations later, all of it sits on top of that one unglamorous moment when a bitter woman got off the ground. So now there are 3 widows on the road out of Moab, and somewhere in those first miles, Naomi stops walking. She turns around and looks at Orpah and Ruth, these 2 young women who have buried her sons, and she does something that sounds cold until you understand it. She tells them to go home. Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that each of you find rest in the house of another husband. Then she kisses them, and all 3 of them break down sobbing in the middle of the road. Understand what Naomi is doing here, because this is not rejection. This is arithmetic. She is running their numbers the way the man in the parking lot ran his. Girls, look at me. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I married tonight and bore sons by morning, would you wait for them to grow up? In Bethlehem you will be foreigners, widows, beggars at the edge of somebody's field. Here in Moab, you are young. You have families. You can marry again and hold your own babies. Your best odds are behind you, not ahead with me. Every word of it is love. It is love wearing the face of refusal. She is prying their fingers off of a sinking ship, and she says one more thing that tells you where her heart is. She says, "It grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." In her mind, she is not just unlucky, she is contaminated. She believes God Himself is against her, and she loves these girls too much to let them stand in the blast radius. The three of them weep again, and then Orpah does it. She kisses her mother-in-law goodbye, turns around, and walks back toward Moab. Now, I want to stop this scene and defend that woman, because Orpah has been slandered from 1,000 pulpits, and the Bible never slanders her once. Look at the text. Orpah loved Naomi. Orpah wept over her. Twice. Orpah initially set out on the road, ready to go. She turned back only after Naomi begged her to. Repeatedly, with arguments that made perfect sense, Orpah did the reasonable thing, the responsible thing, the thing 99 out of 100 of us would do, the thing your financial advisor and your mother and probably your pastor would tell you to do. Scripture never condemns her for it. She walks back toward her mother's house, back toward a sensible future, and quietly steps out of the story forever. That is all. No punishment, no villain music, just an exit. The last we ever see of Orpah is her back. Keep her in your mind, though, because Orpah matters. Without Orpah, you would never see Ruth clearly. It is the reasonable choice standing next to the extraordinary one that shows you what extraordinary actually costs. But before we get to Ruth, we have to name something in Naomi, because there is a counterfeit hiding in this chapter, and it might be living in your house. Naomi believes she is done. Listen to her speeches on this road and at the gate. Every sentence is a closing argument. I am too old. There is no future. The Lord is against me. I went away full and came back empty. And here is the uncomfortable part. Almost every fact she states is true. She is old. Her men are dead. Her prospects, on paper, are zero. If you audited her claims line by line, they would all check out. This is the counterfeit, and it wears the most respectable disguise in the world. It calls itself realism. I am not bitter. It says, I am just being honest. I am not negative. I am just looking at the facts. You know this voice. You may have heard it at your own kitchen table, or in your own head at 2 in the morning. Calm and reasonable and utterly final. And the reason it is so hard to argue with is that its facts are usually accurate. Its facts are accurate. Its timing is a lie. Because bitterness is an audit performed in the middle of the book, Naomi is adding up her life and declaring the final balance. And she is doing it in chapter 1. She has counted everything behind her with perfect accuracy and counted nothing ahead of her, because she cannot see ahead of her. And she has mistaken her blindness for the end of the road. The woman announcing that her story is over is standing at this very moment inside the opening scene of one of the most beloved stories ever written. That is not a small irony. That is the whole disease. Bitterness is never wrong about what happened. Bitterness is wrong about what it means, because it grades an unfinished thing as finished. So here is the question for this second turn of the road, and answer it honestly, because everything after this depends on it. When did you close your books? You know what I mean. The audit you ran on your own life. The year you quietly totaled everything up, wrote empty on the bottom line, and stopped expecting. Maybe it was after the divorce, after the funeral, after the third miscarriage, the failed business, the church that broke your heart. What year did you sign off on the final balance? And here is the harder question underneath it. Who told you that you were qualified to close accounts that God still has open? You were being honest about the fact. I believe you. So was Naomi. But you graded the story at half-time. My friend. And the author was still writing. Naomi finishes her speech there on the road. The arguments are made. The tears are spent. Orpah is a shrinking figure on the horizon, and Naomi turns to the other one, the quiet one, expecting a second goodbye. Ruth has not moved. The text says she clung to her. The Hebrew word is davak, and it is worth knowing, because it is the same word Genesis uses when it says, "A man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife." Covenant, glue. That is what is happening on this road. One widow is welded to another, and no speech about arithmetic is going to cut her loose. And Naomi tries one last time. Look, she says, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Go with her. What comes out of Ruth's mouth next is about to be carved on wedding rings and read at ceremonies for the next 3,000 years. By generations of people who have no idea it was never spoken at a wedding. It was spoken on a dirt road between two graveyards, by a young widow with nothing to an old widow with less, and it is going to cost Ruth everything she has left. It is 6:45 on a Tuesday morning, and a woman is signing her name in the visitor log of a nursing home. The receptionist knows her by now. Same time every Tuesday. 3 years running. She walks the long hallway that smells like lemon cleaner and oatmeal. Past the community room with the television, nobody watches, to room 114, where an 81-year-old woman with Alzheimer's is sitting by the window in her good cardigan. The old woman looks up and smiles, the polite smile you give a stranger. She has no idea who this visitor is. Most Tuesdays she calls her Susan, which is nobody's name. The staff assumed for a whole year that this was her daughter. She is not her daughter. She is her daughter-in-law, and the man who connected them, the old woman's only son. Her husband has been gone for 3 years. Car accident on a Thursday in October. Think about what that means for a second. Legally, the tie between these two women was buried with him. No court would require this. No family would demand it. Her own friends have gently told her, "Honey, you have done enough. You are young. You need to live your life." And every Tuesday at 6:45, she signs the log anyway, and sits with a woman who cannot remember her name, and paints her fingernails a soft shade of pink. Because once, at a Christmas table years ago, she noticed that her mother-in-law liked pretty hands. Nobody sees it. There is no audience for this. The one person who would have treasured it is gone, and the person receiving it forgets it by dinner. Hold that woman in your mind. Hold the picture of her walking that lemon-scented hallway, because she is the closest thing the modern world has to what is about to happen on a dirt road in Moab. Back on that road, Naomi has made her case. Orpah is gone over the horizon, and Naomi turns to Ruth and fires the last argument she has. Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Go after her. Notice she says gods. Naomi is not just pointing Ruth toward Moab. She is pointing her back toward Chemosh, the god of the Moabites. Back toward the whole religious world Ruth was raised in. She is saying, the door is still open. All of it. Your country, your family, your faith, your future. Walk through it. This is your last exit. And Ruth answers, and you have heard these words before. You have heard them at weddings, printed in calligraphy, sung over couples, holding hands in front of flowers. What you may never have felt is what they actually were. So, let me clear the stage. There are no flowers here. There is a dirt road in the hill country. 2 exhausted women in mourning clothes, and a silence where a family used to be. The most famous vow of loyalty in the English language was spoken by one widow to another widow, and it was a vow to share poverty, not a future. Ruth says, do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. Now walk through that vow slowly, one rung at a time, because it is built like a ladder, going down into deeper and deeper water, and every rung costs her something specific. Where you go, I will go. There goes her country, the plateau she grew up on, the landscape her eyes know by heart. Gone. Where you stay, I will stay. There goes her home, any home, because Naomi has no house waiting, no roof to offer. Ruth is vowing to be homeless with her. Your people will be my people. There goes her identity. She is volunteering to become a permanent foreigner, a Moabite in Bethlehem, a woman who will be introduced by her accent for the rest of her life. Your God will be my God. There goes her religion, her parents' religion, every prayer she was taught as a child. And notice something remarkable about this line. Nobody preached to Ruth. There was no sermon, no altar call, no missionary. The only witness to the God of Israel that Ruth ever saw was a bitter old woman who currently believes that God has ruined her, and somehow watching Naomi lose everything. Ruth saw something in that faith worth trading her whole world for. Sometimes the sermon nobody hears is the life somebody watches. And then the last rung, the one that goes below the waterline. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. In the ancient world, your grave was your address in eternity. You were gathered to your fathers, buried with your people, in your land. Ruth is saying, I am not coming to Bethlehem to try it out. I am renouncing even the Moabite dirt I was supposed to be buried in. There is no version of this where I go home. And then she seals it with an oath in the name of Yahweh, the covenant name of Israel's God, the first time that sacred name ever crosses her lips in Scripture. A Moabite girl swears by the God of Israel on an open road. The first convert in this book was made without a single sermon being preached. Now do the math on what Ruth just did, because this is the second turning point of the story, and its logic is upside down. Orpah went back toward possibility. Ruth just welded herself to the one person on earth who can give her nothing. Naomi has no money, no land, no song, no connections, no plan. Every earthly incentive points the other way, which means what Ruth just did has a purity to it that almost nothing in this world has. It cannot be explained by what she gets out of it, because there is nothing to get. It is loyalty with the profit removed. The Hebrew language has a word for this, and it is one of the most beautiful words in the whole Bible. So I am going to give it to you now, and you will carry it for the rest of this journey. The word is hesed. Your English Bible translates it kindness, or loyal love, or steadfast love, and every translation limps a little, because hesed is bigger than the words we have. Hesed is love that does more than the contract requires, for someone who cannot pay it back, at a moment when walking away would be completely fair. That is the engine of the entire book of Ruth. Watch for it. It will show up in a field, at a midnight threshing floor, and at a city gate, and it just showed up on this road, wearing the dust of Moab. Which brings us to the counterfeit, because loyalty has a counterfeit, and it is everywhere in our world, and it sounds so wise you may have mistaken it for maturity. It talks like this: I have to think about myself right now. I cannot pour from an empty cup. I did not sign up for this. You need to protect your peace. Cut your losses. Not let anyone become a burden on your life. And listen. Sometimes those sentences are true and necessary. There are toxic situations that demand distance, and this journey will honor that when we get to it. But be honest about the other times, because there is a version of love that stays only while staying is convenient, and it always has an exit speech ready. It sounds reasonable, because it is reasonable. That is the tell. Orpah's love was real, and it was reasonable, and it went home when the road got long. Ruth's love burned the map. Convenient love keeps a return ticket in its pocket. Covenant love buys one way. And here is the line I want you to write somewhere, because it is the plumb line of this whole chapter. Loyalty does not even begin to be measured until the moment walking away becomes completely justified. Before that point, nobody can tell the difference between love and convenience, because they behave identically. The nursing home hallway, the third year of the illness, the season with no thanks in it. That is where the two finally separate. That is the only place they separate. Everything before that is just weather. Now watch Naomi's response to the most beautiful vow in the Old Testament, because the text records it with brutal honesty. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. That is it. That is all. No embrace. No tears of gratitude. No blessing. She just stopped arguing. And the narrator tells us the two of them walked on to Bethlehem, and records not one further word between them for the entire journey. A woman just received the greatest gift of her life. A human being volunteering to share her ruin, and she is so hollowed out by grief that she cannot feel the weight of what was just placed in her hands. Do not judge her. Understand her. Because grief does exactly this. Grief can stand you right next to a miracle and swear to you the room is empty. Grief teaches you to count what is missing with such precision, such daily practiced accuracy, that you lose the ability to count what is still standing beside you, carrying your bag, matching your steps on the road. And so they come to Bethlehem, these two, just as the barley harvest is beginning, and the town erupts, and the women say, "Is this Naomi?" And you already know what she answers. You heard it at the start of this journey, but hear it now with new ears. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Empty. She says the word empty while Ruth is standing beside her, while the vow is still warm, while Hesed itself, in a road-stained dress, is holding her arm. Naomi looks at her life, does the audit, announces the balance is zero, and the whole time, the answer to her future is close enough to touch, uncounted, invisible, because bitterness had already taught her eyes what they were allowed to see. So here is the question for this third turn of the road, and it comes in two parts. So let both of them in. First, who is your Ruth? Who is standing beside you right now? In this season, you have labeled empty, and you have not counted them. The friend who keeps calling, the kid who keeps coming home, the spouse still sleeping on their side of the bed after everything. Grief made you an expert accountant of your losses. When is the last time you audited what stayed? And second, the harder one, whose Ruth are you? Somewhere in your life there is a Naomi, somebody broken and bitter and giving you every reasonable excuse to go. And the road is asking what your love is made of. Is your vow still standing? Or have you been quietly rehearsing an exit speech that sounds, even to you, extremely reasonable? Two widows walk through the gate of Bethlehem with nothing, and I mean nothing. No man, no land, no income, and the barley harvest waving gold on every hillside around them. All of it belonging to somebody else. In that entire ancient world, there was exactly one legal way for two women like this to eat without begging and without selling themselves. One narrow door, written into the law of Israel centuries earlier by a God who apparently saw these two coming. It opens at dawn, at the ragged edge of a stranger's field, and it is going to ask Ruth for the one thing she has left, her bag. It is 4:50 in the morning, and a woman in a grey uniform is stepping off the number 7 bus into the cold. She works the early shift at a distribution warehouse, the shift nobody wants, and her left shoe has worn down along the outside edge, because that is how she stands at the sorting line, hour after hour, leaning into it. Last night, on her break, she checked her email in the stairwell. Application number 40. The office job. The one with daylight in it. We regret to inform you. A piece of software rejected her before any human eyes ever saw her name. She read it twice. Then she put the phone in her pocket, finished the shift, went home, slept 5 hours, and set the alarm for 4:15, because rent is not interested in her feelings. And today the work is here. So here is where she will be. Understand something about that woman, because the world walks past 10,000 of her every morning without looking. What she is doing is not just endurance. There is a kind of faith that never feels like faith from the inside. It feels like setting an alarm for 4:15 when you have no evidence at all that today will be different from the 40 days before it. It never gets called faith from a pulpit. Heaven calls it that. Though, you are about to see why. Because centuries before Ruth ever walked into Bethlehem, God wrote something strange into the law of Israel. And I want you to hear how strange it actually is. Buried in the book of Leviticus, in the middle of the harvest regulations, is this command: when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, and do not gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go back for the forgotten sheaf. Do not strip your vineyard bare. Leave them for the poor, for the widow, and for the foreigner. Read that again slowly, because it is one of the only laws in history that commands people to be inefficient on purpose. Every farming instinct says, harvest it all. Every stalk, every corner. It is your land and your seed and your sweat. And the God of Israel says no. Leave the corners ragged. Leave the dropped stalks on the ground. Build waste into your harvest. Deliberately. Because that waste is not waste. That is the food of people who have fallen through every other flaw. 3,000 years before anybody said the words social safety net, God stitched one into the hemline of every field in Israel. But look closely at the design, because the genius is in the design. It is not a handout. Nobody gathers the grain for the poor and delivers it with a speech. The corners just stand there. The dropped stalks just lie there. If you want to eat, you come at dawn. You bend your back, and you glean it yourself, stalk by stalk, behind the paid workers. Which means the law preserved two things at once, and only heaven thinks to protect both. It preserved the poor man's stomach, and it preserved his dignity. He does not beg. He works. He walks home at the end of the day carrying grain that his own hands earned, and he owes nobody a performance of gratitude. That was the law on the scrolls. Now, let me show you the law in real life, because there was a gap between the two, and Ruth is about to walk into the gap. A law can give you the right to glean. A law cannot make the men in the field decent. Think of every workplace you have ever been in. And now remove the cameras. The Human Resources Office, and 3,000 years of progress. A young woman, alone, foreign, with no husband and no brothers, bending over all day at the edge of a field full of laboring men. The Bible itself tells you exactly how dangerous that was. And it tells you sideways, through the mouths of people who lived there. Later, in this very chapter, a landowner will say to Ruth, I have ordered the young men not to touch you. Hold on to that sentence. Men do not issue orders against a danger that does not exist. And Naomi herself will say to Ruth, it is good for you to stay in this one field, so that in someone else's field you will not be harmed. That is a local woman telling you what the locals knew. The gleaning law was a door, and on the other side of the door, nobody guaranteed your safety. Every field was a roll of the dice. Ruth knows all of this. She is not naive. She is Moabite. She has heard every joke Israelites tell about her people. And on her first morning in Bethlehem, while Naomi sits in whatever borrowed corner they are sleeping in, still too hollow to plan, Ruth stands up in the dark and says the words that quietly carry this whole chapter. Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Listen to what is folded inside that sentence. She does not know one single person in this town. Not a name, not a face, not a friend. She is going out to search, field by field, for something she has zero evidence exists. A pair of kind eyes in a country famous for despising her kind. And she goes anyway. She does not wait for kindness to be confirmed before she moves. She moves and hunts for kindness on the way. So there she is at first light, and now stay with her body for a minute, because we say the word gleaning too quickly. Feel the day, bend at the waist, pinch a fallen stalk out of the stubble, straighten, step, bend again. Now do that 1,000 times, 2,000. The sun climbs, and the hill country bakes, and the dust rises off the cut field and coats her throat. The paid harvesters move ahead of her in a line, swinging their blades, singing their songs, belonging. She follows behind, at a careful distance, in the space reserved for the poor, picking up what their hands lost. Every stalk is one mouthful of bread that Naomi will eat. That is the exchange rate of her love now. One bend of the back, one bite for the bitter old woman who has not even thanked her. And here is the truth this chapter has been walking toward. So let me say it plainly, and then get out of the way. Providence does not replace work. Providence ambushes work. In this whole book, God's provision never once falls out of the sky onto a person sitting still. It waits inside a field that somebody has to get up and walk into. Ruth prays for favor the way farmers pray for rain, with a plow already in the ground, which drags a counterfeit into the light. And this one wears the most spiritual costume in the whole wardrobe. It calls itself waiting on the Lord. I am trusting God for a breakthrough. I am waiting for Him to open a door. And hear me carefully, because there are real seasons of waiting, holy ones, and blessed are those who endure them. But there is also a fear of trying that has learned to talk like faith. There is a paralysis that quotes Bible verses, and the two can live in the same pew, wearing the same words, for years. So how do you tell them apart? Look at the hands. That is the whole test. Real trust and real movement are old friends. They show up together all through this book. Ruth believed the God of Israel would shelter her, and she was in the field by sunrise. She asked heaven for favor with her spine bent and her fingers in the dirt. The counterfeit waits for the harvest to be delivered. The real thing walks out to the edge of the field and starts picking it up. So here is the question for this turn of the road, and I will make it as concrete as I can. That field you have been waiting to be carried into, the job you will not apply for, the counseling office you will not call, the class you keep not enrolling in, the church you have driven past for a year. How far is it? Honestly, from your front door. And if God has already stationed the answer somewhere inside it, standing in the tall grain where you cannot see it from the porch, how many more sunrises does He have to wait for you? Now, everything in this chapter has been ordinary, a law, a field, a tired woman, a morning of work. Hold all of it, because the narrator of Ruth is about to do something sly. And if you blink, you will miss the wink. Chapter 2, verse 3. Your English Bible probably says something smooth, like, as it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz. As it turned out, But in Hebrew, the sentence is built strangely, almost comically, on purpose, rendered literally. It reads something like this: "And her chance chanced upon the portion of the field belonging to Boaz." Her chance chanced. The writer doubled the word. This is an ancient author looking up from the scroll, straight at you, across 3,000 years, with one eyebrow raised. Out of every field ringing Bethlehem that morning, this foreign widow, who knows no one, who chose her spot by nothing but hope and daylight, has just bent her back over the one piece of ground on planet Earth that belongs to a wealthy relative of her dead father-in-law. She has no idea. She is just picking up barley, stalk by stalk, in what she believes is a stranger's field. Coincidence is the word we use for coordinates we cannot see yet. And while she works, the morning is warming, and there is dust rising on the road from town. Someone is coming out to inspect the harvest. The owner of this field is about to walk into his own story. And the first thing he will ever say about Ruth is a question. Whose young woman is this? It is a Friday afternoon in a regional office, and the chief executive is making a visit. You know the ritual. The parking spot is coned off. The good coffee comes out. Managers who have not smiled all quarter are practicing in the restroom mirror. The great man moves through the floor shaking hands, and everyone gets their 8 seconds. And the whole thing runs on rails, except for one moment that never makes the company newsletter. Near the freight elevator, a cleaning woman in a grey polo is trying to make herself invisible against the wall, the way people do when they believe the event is not for them. And the executive stops, leaves the rail, puts out his hand and asks her name. "Rosa," she says, barely. And 20 minutes later, walking out with his assistants, he passes her again and says, "Thank you, Rosa. This place shines." She will tell that story for years. Her grandchildren will hear it. And it is worth asking why. Because he did not raise her pay, did not change her job, did not do anything you could enter into a ledger. What he did was see her, for about 30 seconds, in front of everyone. She was not equipment. She existed. There are many ways to measure a person, but the oldest one in the world is this. Watch what someone does when a person enters the room who can do absolutely nothing for them. That is the whole exam. And a landowner outside Bethlehem is about to take it in front of the entire Bible. The morning is warming over the barley when he arrives from town, and the first words out of his mouth tell you something before you even learn his name. He calls out to his harvesters, "The Lord be with you." And they call back, "The Lord bless you." Do not rush past that little exchange. This is a man who carries his God into his payroll. Faith on the job site, on an ordinary work day, in the tone of a greeting. Whatever else Boaz is, he is not a Sunday-only man. He is also, the text tells us, a man of standing, land, workers, wealth, a name that opens doors at the city gate. In this whole story of widows and empty hands, Boaz is the first character we meet who has power, real power, the kind that can protect a vulnerable person, or use one, and nobody in that field would ever question him either way. And his landowner's eye, the eye that counts sheaves and reads clouds, snags on something that does not fit. A young woman at the far edge, behind the workers, bent in the gleaner's row. He turns to his foreman and asks, "Whose young woman is this?" The question sounds strange to us, maybe even wrong, so let it be what it was. In that world, a woman was located by her people, whose daughter, whose wife, whose household. The question means, where does she belong? And the foreman's answer lays the whole brutal truth out in the sun. She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi, meaning Sir. She belongs to no one, no father here, no husband, no house. And notice the label, not her name, her nationality, the Moabite. That word is going to follow Ruth through this entire book, the way a file follows a person. And every time it appears, somebody is deciding what it means. But the foreman adds one more thing, and it changes the weather. He says, she asked permission to glean, and she has been on her feet since early morning, hardly resting at all. Hear what just happened. Ruth's reputation walked into that field before she did. Days of bent-backed, uncomplaining work had already spoken for her to men she had never met. Your character is always giving testimony somewhere, in rooms you are not in. Now watch Boaz, because what he does next comes in a chain, link after link. And I want you to see every link, because this chain is the third turning point of the story, wearing work clothes. He walks over to her, this wealthy man, to this foreign gleaner, and the first word he gives her is family. My daughter, he says. Measure that word. 10 minutes ago she was the Moabite. In one breath he moves her from a nationality to a relative. Then, listen to me. Do not glean in another field. Stay here. He is not fencing her in. He knows what she does not, what every local knows, that the next field over might not be safe, and he is closing the gate against it. Then, stay close behind my young women. He gives her a position inside the formation, the protected pocket where the working women move together. Then he says the sentence I told you to hold on to. I have ordered the young men not to touch you. Out loud, in front of the young men, he names the danger everyone pretends not to see. And he ends it, publicly, with his own authority. He does not whisper protection to her. He announces it to them. Then, when you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars the young men have filled. Stop and taste how upside down that is. In the pecking order of that field, the foreign gleaner drinks last, if at all. From whatever is left, Boaz just inverted the entire order. The men drew the water. The Moabite widow drinks it. And Ruth breaks. She falls with her face to the ground, and the question comes out of her like something that has been pressing on her ribs all morning. Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? Stay right here, because this is the center of the chapter. And I would say it is one of the centers of the whole Bible's teaching on grace. Why me? And she hands him the reason it should not be her. I am a foreigner. She has heard the word Moabite behind her back so many times that she offers it herself, in advance, like a woman handing over her file before you can ask for it. Anyone who has ever walked into a room where they did not belong, the wrong accent, the wrong resume, the wrong past, has prayed some version of Ruth's question. Why would you be kind to someone like me? And Boaz's answer shows you what he sees when he looks at her, because it is not a nationality. He says, "I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland, and came to live with a people you did not know before." He recites her hesed back to her, the vow on the road, the loyalty with the prophet removed. All of it reached his ears before she reached his field. And then he lifts his hand and says a blessing over her. And I need you to memorize this blessing, because it is a seed, and it is going to grow into the most beautiful moment of this entire story. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Under whose wings? Keep those 2 words. Put them in your pocket. Do not lose them. In a few chapters, in the middle of the night, somebody is going to hand them back to Boaz. And when it happens, it will take the roof off this story. Then comes mealtime, and the chain gets one more link. The harvesters gather around the food. The insiders circle, and Boaz calls to her, "Come over here. Have some bread. Dip it in the wine vinegar." He seats the gleaner at the workers' table, and the text says he himself passed her the roasted grain, the landowner serving the Moabite with his own hand. And then 5 words that shine like gold, if you know what to look for. She ate all she wanted, and had some left over. Left over? Run the arithmetic of her life. This woman crossed a border with nothing, walked into town beside a woman, announcing the word empty. And this afternoon, for the first time in the whole story, somebody's hands are holding more than they need. Surplus has entered the Book of Ruth, and it entered through generosity. So here is the truth of this 3rd turning point. And after everything you have just watched, it should feel less like a lesson and more like a caption. Grace almost never announces itself. It arrives disguised as an ordinary day, and it usually arrives wearing an ordinary person. Somebody who woke up that morning with a little bit of power and decided to spend it as cover instead of leverage. And notice what grace did in that field. It fed her. Yes, but watch it closer. It named her, seated her, defended her, blessed her. Survival was the smallest thing Boaz gave Ruth today. The bigger gift was the one suffering had been peeling off of her since Moab. Dignity. Now the counterfeit. And this one is going to step on toes, mine included. Ask what the law actually required of Boaz. Go back to Leviticus and read the fine print. He had to leave the corners of his field and not pick up the dropped stalks. That is the whole bill. He could have gone his entire life without learning Ruth's name, without a word to the young men, without 1 cup of drawn water, and stood before God technically clean. Nothing in the law said, feed her lunch. Nothing said, see her. And that is exactly where the counterfeit lives. It is minimum compliance, wearing the costume of goodness. You know its voice, because it is everywhere. And some days it is ours. I pay my taxes. I do my job. I never hurt anybody. I am not the problem. Every clause true. Every clause legal. And a whole life can hide inside that list without ever once being kind. The law told Boaz what he owed. Hesed asked him a different question entirely. It asked what he had. The distance between those 2 questions, between what do I owe and what do I have, That distance is the field. Everything beautiful in this chapter happened inside it. So here is the question for this turn of the road. And do not answer it in general. Answer it with names. At the edge of your field, whatever your field is, an office, a classroom, a kitchen table, a church lobby. Somebody is gleaning, working the margin, staying small against the wall, hoping and dreading to be noticed. Do you know their name? Not their category. Their name, and that little bit of power you carry in that room. The seniority, the title, the being from there, the simply belonging. What has it been doing lately? Has it been cover for anybody? Or has it just been comfortable? The sun is going down on the best day Ruth has had in years. She beats out what she gleaned, and it comes to an ephah of barley. And your Bible drops that measurement without a footnote. So let me give you the footnote. An ephah is around 30 pounds. A strong gleaner on a lucky day might bring home 2 or 3. Ruth is walking out of this field with roughly 10 days of food on her shoulder from a single afternoon, plus the roasted grain she saved back from lunch, carrying it through town in the failing light toward the borrowed corner where a bitter old woman is waiting. And when Naomi sees what walks through that door, when she hears the name of the man behind it, something is going to happen to her that has not happened since Moab. The woman who closed her books is about to reopen them. There is a piano in a living room that has not been opened in 2 years. It was her husband's. Sunday evenings, he played the old hymns with more heart than skill, and the house was full of it. And then one January, he was gone, and the lid came down, quietly. Over the months, the piano became a shelf, mail stacked up on the low end. A plant took the high end. Furniture now, a flat surface with a memory inside it that nobody was allowed to touch. Then one afternoon her grandson comes over, 6 years old, born the year after the funeral. And while she is in the kitchen, he wanders the living room, and he does what 6-year-olds do. He lifts the lid, and he presses 3 keys. Badly, at random. 3 notes that are not even a song. And in the kitchen, a woman stands up straight with a dish towel in her hand, and she cannot move. It is not the melody. There is no melody. It is that the house just made a sound from the part of her life she had sealed off, and the air changed. And for 3 notes, she remembered that this room used to have a future in it. Hope hardly ever comes back like a sunrise. It comes back like 3 wrong notes from another room. Small, accidental, and suddenly you are standing up straight. Naomi is in the borrowed corner of somebody's house in Bethlehem when her 3 notes walk through the door. Picture it from her side of the room. Her daughter-in-law left in the dark this morning to go do the lowest work in Israel. And Naomi knows the arithmetic of gleaning. A good day is a little sack, enough to keep 2 widows 1 step ahead of hunger. And through the door comes Ruth carrying 30 pounds of threshed barley, plus a bundle of roasted grain, saved back from an actual meal. And Naomi comes alive. Read her lines in the text, because after a chapter and a half of monotone grief, suddenly her sentences have blood in them. Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. 3 sentences, tumbling out on top of each other. 2 questions and a blessing. And catch that last one. because Naomi does not know it yet. But she is already healing. The woman who announced that the Almighty had emptied her, that the hand of the Lord was against her, just blessed somebody by reflex. The theology of her mouth is arguing with the theology of her wound, and her mouth moved first. Sometimes gratitude comes back before hope does, and holds the door open for it. Ruth answers with a name. The man I worked with today is named Boaz, and you have to imagine the silence after that name, the length of it, because inside that silence, Naomi's entire map of the universe is being redrawn. Then she says it, and I want you to hear this sentence as the hinge of her whole life. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. There is our word again, chesed, kindness that keeps going after every reason to stop. But look at who Naomi says it about. Because on the surface, she is talking about Boaz, and underneath, she is talking about someone else. Because Boaz has done nothing for the dead. He fed a gleaner lunch. No, the one whose hesed reaches the living and the dead is the Lord. And Naomi knows it. And this is the first sentence in the entire book where she says his name without an accusation attached. Chapter 1, Naomi said, "The Lord has brought me back empty. The Almighty has made my life bitter." Tonight, holding a fistful of barley from a field she has never seen, she says, He never stopped. And do the math on those two words. The dead. She means her men. Elimelech. Machlon. In Naomi's mind, for the first time since 3 funerals in Moab, her dead have come back into the story. Because if God's kindness can still touch them, then their chapter is not closed either. The audit she signed off on is reopening, line by line. Then she leans toward Ruth and says the thing that turns this book from a survival story into something else entirely. That man is our close relative. He is one of our redeemers. Redeemer. In Hebrew, hum. And I need to stop the story here and hand you this word, because the entire back half of this journey runs on it, and it may be the most beautiful piece of law God ever wrote. Here is how it worked, and hear it like a family secret, not a statute. In ancient Israel, when a household went over the cliff, and households went over the cliff all the time, drought, debt, death, the law did not shrug and let the market sort it out. The law appointed somebody. The nearest able relative held a title, the Ghoul, the kinsman redeemer, and with the title came a job. If your kin lost the family land to debt, the redeemer could buy it back. If your kin sold themselves into servitude, the redeemer could purchase their freedom. And in a situation like this one, where a man died without a son, and his widow was left holding a dead branch of the family tree, redemption could reach even there, restoring land, and line, and name, so that a man's family did not simply evaporate from Israel because he died at the wrong time. Follow what a redeemer actually is, because the shape of it should be making the hair on your arms stand up. A redeemer is a relative. It has to be family. An outsider has no standing. A redeemer is able. It takes real resources to buy back what was lost. And a redeemer pays, always, out of his own pocket, to recover people who cannot recover themselves. Somebody related enough, rich enough, and willing enough to climb down into your ruin and carry you out on his own credit. Hold that shape in your mind. This little book is drawing a picture it will take the rest of the Bible to finish. But there is one more thing about the Goel law, and it is the thing that keeps this story from being over tonight. Redemption was a right, never a requirement. The law opened the door for the Redeemer. It did not push him through it. He could look at the whole situation, count the cost, and legally, respectably, walk away, which means everything. And write this down somewhere. Everything hangs in the gap between two things: the right to redeem and the will to pay. Naomi and Ruth are about to live the rest of this story inside that gap. So, a fire has been lit in Naomi tonight. But watch what happens next. Because the text does something sly with time. It says Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz and gleaned until the barley and wheat harvests were finished. 7 weeks, maybe 8. An entire harvest season goes by in one verse. And inside those weeks, a strange quiet settles over the story. Every day Ruth goes to the field. Every day Boaz is kind, generous, protective, honorable. And that is all. 7 weeks, and the man does nothing more. The text never tells us why, and we should respect its silence. But it leaves clues lying around. Later, at midnight, Boaz will thank Ruth for not running after younger men, which tells you he is older, and tells you he had quietly assumed a woman like her would never look at a man like him. And he knows something else, something he has been carrying all harvest, something you and I will not learn until it is almost too late. Whatever the reason, understand the moment. The harvest is ending. The fields are going bare. The one legal doorway feeding these 2 women is swinging shut for the year, and the kind man goes on being kindly, generously, honorably silent. Somebody has to move, and the somebody who moves is the last character you would have picked in chapter 1. Naomi, the woman we met announcing her own ending, sits Ruth down one evening and says, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you? A home where you will be provided for." The woman who could not imagine a future is now designing one. Out loud, for someone she loves. Hear the 3 piano notes in that sentence. Hope did not come back to Naomi as a feeling. It came back as a plan. And what a plan. Wash yourself. She says, put on perfume. Dress in your best clothes. Go down to the threshing floor tonight, where Boaz will be winnowing barley. But do not let him see you. Watch where he lies down when the eating and drinking are done. Then go, uncover his feet, lie down there, and he will tell you what to do. Let the audacity of that land on you. A midnight approach, at a threshing floor, during harvest festival season. 1 unmarried foreign woman and 1 sleeping man of standing. Naomi is wagering everything on this. Ruth's reputation, which is the only wealth Ruth has. Boaz's honor, their single fragile connection to safety. One wrong reading of this scene by one gossip at the edge of that floor, and both women are finished in Bethlehem. This is not a plan. This is a prayer with logistics. The waiting season is over, and Naomi knows it. There comes a moment in every restoration when waiting quietly stops being faith and starts being fear. And the only road forward runs through a courageous, dangerous ask, spoken out loud, to a person who has every right to say no. So here is the question before the sun goes down on this chapter, and it is a gentle one. but do not let it slide off. Your 3 notes, have they sounded yet? The name that came up, the door that cracked, the small unexpected provision that made you. Just for one evening. Start sketching plans again. And what did you do with it? Did you let it wake you? The way a name woke Naomi. Or did you press the lid back down? Because in your experience, hope is just the setup for the next loss. And you have decided you cannot afford it twice. Ruth listens to the whole plan. This plan, holding everything she has left in the world over an open flame, and she answers with one sentence. The same iron that spoke on the road from Moab. All that you say, I will do. Night comes down on Bethlehem, out past the edge of town, on the high open ground where the wind runs. Torchlight flickers over the threshing floor, and the sounds of the harvest feast rise and then slowly die away. And one by one, the workers stretch out by the grain piles and sleep, and down the dark hillside, bathed and dressed, and carrying the whole rest of this story on her shoulders, a woman is walking. There is a man standing in a hospital hallway at 12 minutes past midnight, holding a phone he cannot make himself use. His mother is behind the door to his left, sleeping under the thin blanket of a heart monitor's rhythm. The doctors use the word stable, and then they use the word tonight, and the 2 words did not sound like they belonged in the same sentence. And on the screen in his hand, under his thumb, is a name he has not dialed in 8 years. His brother. There was a fight. There was an inheritance. There were words at a funeral that neither of them ever took back. And 8 Christmases have gone by on opposite sides of a silence that started small and calcified. Understand what dialing costs. If he calls at midnight, he is exposed all the way down. His brother can see the missed call and let it rot. His brother can answer and hang up. His brother can say the sentence he said 8 years ago, the one that started all of this, and say it again with interest. Not calling is safe. Not calling keeps him armored. Not calling also keeps him alone in a hallway that smells like antiseptic, while the only other person on earth who shares his mother sleeps 60 miles away, unaware. The most dangerous prayers in the world are not prayed in churches. They are prayed at midnight, out loud, to a person who holds the full power to say no. His thumb is still hovering when we leave him. Keep him in your mind, because on a dark threshing floor outside Bethlehem, a woman is about to make the midnight ask that his hallway is only a shadow of rain. The threshing floor sits on high open ground above the town, where the evening wind comes through steady enough to carry the chaff away. All through harvest, the winnowing goes on into the dark, grain tossed into the wind, the heavy kernels raining back down, the straw drifting off like smoke. And when the work ends, the feast begins, because harvest was the one season when a farming town let out its breath, bread and wine and firelight. Then, by the men bed down right there beside the grain piles, because a season's wealth lies heaped in the open, and thieves know the calendar too. The text says Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was glad, and he went to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. The fires burn low, the voices die out, the wind moves over the hill, and a shadow detaches itself from the darkness at the edge of the floor. She has been there for hours, hidden, watching, exactly as Naomi instructed. She marked where he lay down, Now she moves between sleeping men, one careful step at a time, over ground littered with straw, toward the far end of the grain. Every step is a coin flipped, one man stirring, one dog barking, one voice saying, "Who is there?" And everything ends. Her name in this town is the only wealth she has, and she is carrying all of it across that floor in the dark. She reaches him. She uncovers his feet, the night-cold, slow alarm clock, and she lies down, and she waits. The text says that in the middle of the night, something startled the man. He shivered, turned, and there, a shape at his feet, a woman. You can feel his heart slamming from 3,000 years away. A season's grain around him, a body where no body should be. Darkness too thick to read a face, and his voice comes out low and sharp. "Who are you?" Now stop, because before she answers, I have to be straight with you about this scene, about what it is and what it is not, because this chapter has been mishandled in both directions for centuries. Some readers rush to make it a scandal, a seduction in the dark. The text does not say that, and the text was perfectly capable of saying that. And everything both people do before sunrise argues against it. Other readers rush to scrub the scene clean, to make it safe and ceremonial. The text does not allow that either. The author built this scene to make you hold your breath, deliberately, because two reputations and two futures are lying on a knife's edge in the dark, and the narrator wants your pulse up. What we can say is what is written. A request is about to be made. Nothing shameful happens, and at first light, Boaz will move heaven and earth to guard her name, not because something is hidden, but because he knows the arithmetic of gossip, that a story does not need to be true to end a woman in a small town. "Who are you?" he says, and out of the darkness comes one of the bravest sentences in all of Scripture. "I am your servant Ruth. Spread your garment over your servant, for you are a redeemer." I want to slow this sentence down until you can see all the way inside it, because there is a detonation packed in the middle of it. And it is my favorite detail in this entire book. Spread your garment over me. The Hebrew word she uses for garment is kanaf, and kanaf does not primarily mean garment. It means wing. The corner of a man's robe was called its wing, so her words carry both pictures at once. Spread your wing over me. Now reach into your pocket. I told you in the barley field to keep 2 words, and I told you somebody would hand them back to Boaz in the middle of the night. Here it is. Weeks ago, in the sunlight, over the roasted grain, Boaz laid a blessing on this woman. May the Lord repay you. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings, kanaf, you have come to take refuge. Same Wort, his word. She caught it that afternoon, and she has been carrying it through 7 weeks of bent-backed work. And tonight, in the dark, she takes his own prayer and lays it back in his hands. You asked God to shelter me under his wings. Sir, would you be willing to be the wing you prayed for? Stand still and let that land, because it is bigger than a clever echo. This is one of the most quietly staggering moments in the Bible. A woman inviting a man to become the answer to his own blessing. And it carries a truth that reaches right off that threshing floor into your week. Be careful what you pray over people. Watch what you ask God to do for the struggling friend, the drowning family, the lonely widow down the street. Because heaven has a long habit, an established pattern of answering your prayer with your own two hands. Boaz asked the Lord to cover her. The Lord, apparently, agreed, and the Lord's chosen equipment was standing in Boaz's sandals, and she adds the legal ground for her boldness. For you are a redeemer. There is Naomi's word. Oh, out loud on the threshing floor. Ruth is not flirting in the dark. She is invoking a covenant office. She is saying, you hold the family title that can buy back Elimelech's land and raise up Mahlon's name, and I am formally asking you to use it. And understand, she is asking for marriage. Yes, but look at what the marriage is for, and who it is for. A son born of this redemption would carry the dead man's line and inherit the dead man's field. And Naomi's branch of the family, the branch everyone had written off, would live. Ruth is spending her one midnight, her one throw of the dice, largely on her mother-in-law's future. Boaz hears all of it. The silence after her words must have lasted a lifetime. And when he finally speaks, the first sound out of this startled man in the middle of the night is a blessing. The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. There is our word one more time. And now it has traveled the whole story. Hesed. He is saying, I see exactly what this is. You are young. You could have had a young man's arm to sleep on. Instead, you aimed your whole future at a graying redeemer, to raise a dead man's name for a bitter old woman's sake. Your first Hesed was the road from Moab. This midnight is a greater one. He sees her, all the way down, in the dark. He sees her more clearly than the whole town saw her at noon. And then, do not be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the words the man in the hospital hallway is terrified of hearing reversed, poured out in a rush, and then a sentence to frame and hang on a wall. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. In Hebrew, Eshed Child, woman of valor. If those words sound familiar, it is because they open the famous closing poem of Proverbs 31. The portrait of the excellent wife that Jewish husbands have sung over their wives at the Sabbath table for centuries. An entire people's highest praise for a woman. And in the whole narrative sweep of the Bible, the one woman who actually wears the title in her own story is not a daughter of Israel at all. She is a Moabite gleaner, lying in the straw with everything on the line. The town that called her the foreigner has been quietly rewriting her file all season. And tonight, the file has a new name on it. So there it is. He said yes. Breathe out. The music can swell now. The story can run downhill to a wedding. Except Boaz is still talking, and with his next breath, the floor drops out. It is true that I am a redeemer, but there is a redeemer nearer than I. Feel that. All night, all season, all story long. You and Ruth and Naomi have been building on one assumption, that the choice belonged to Boaz. And now, at the moment of yes, we learn that this careful, honorable man has been carrying a secret through the whole harvest. The law ranks redeemers by blood. Somewhere in Bethlehem tonight, sleeping under his own safe roof, is a man with a stronger claim. a closer relative, first in line, a man whose name we do not even know, and everything, the land, the marriage, the widow's future, the entire freight of this story has just been placed in his hands. Now you know why Boaz was silent for 7 weeks. It was never indifference. A man of the gate does not touch what the law says is not yet his to touch. But hear what Boaz does with the obstacle. Stay the night. He says, "It is not safe to cross the floor now. And in the morning, if this nearer man will redeem you, good, let him. But if he will not, then, as surely as the Lord lives, I will lie down until morning." He takes an oath on the divine name at midnight, and then he does 2 more things before the sun comes up, and both of them tell you exactly who he is. While the dark still holds, he sends her home early, saying, "Let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor," spending his caution on her reputation. And then he takes her shawl and measures into it 6 measures of barley, a load so heavy he has to help set it on her. And he says, "Why? Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed." Empty-handed, that is his word. And it is Naomi's word, the very word she nailed over the door of her life at the gate of Bethlehem. "I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty." The message in that barley is not breakfast. It is an answer, sent from a threshing floor to a bitter woman's oldest wound. Tell Naomi the empty years are ending. And Ruth walks home in the gray before dawn, and tells Naomi everything. And Naomi, who has lived long enough to read men, delivers the verdict that closes the scene. "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today. Now, before we follow him, the counterfeit, because this chapter has one, and it may be wearing your clothes. It calls itself humility. It says, 'I do not want to bother anyone. I do not like to impose. If God wants it to happen, it will happen on its own.' And friend, sometimes that is real meekness, and it is lovely, but a lot of the time it is something else, wearing meekness like a coat. It is the fear of hearing no, dressed up in church language. And here is how you test it. Ruth could have gleaned in silence forever. She could have been humble and deferential and invisible right up until the harvest ended and the food ran out. And she would have died a polite, unredeemed gleaner. The blessing had her name on it. It still required her voice. There are provisions of God waiting in your life. I genuinely believe this, that are not being withheld by heaven. They are simply parked, idling, waiting on a request you keep not making, because the person you must ask has the power to refuse you. So here is the question, and you already know it, because your stomach tightened in that hospital hallway. What is your midnight ask? The call sitting under your thumb for 8 years? The apology you owe or the one you need? The sentence, "Would you be willing?" spoken out loud to a person who can say no. How long has it been waiting? And how much longer are you planning to let the fear of one word, no, make the decision that belongs to God? Morning breaks over Bethlehem. A man rises from the grain pile, shakes off the straw, and walks down the hill with his jaw set, past his own front door, straight to the place where every binding thing in that town is done in the open, the city gate. He sits down where everyone can see him, And the very first man to come walking through the gate that morning, out of every soul in Bethlehem, is the nearer Redeemer himself. And the narrator, one last time, looks up from the scroll and raises an eyebrow, as if to say, "What a coincidence." There is a kitchen table tonight with a single sheet of paper on it, and a man sitting over the paper with a pen he has not clicked. It is a loan guarantee. Co-signer. That is the line waiting for his name. His younger brother is on the other end of it. The brother who wrecked his 20s, who is 4 years sober now, who found a small contracting business he could buy into if somebody with good credit would stand behind him. The bank will not move without a second signature. And every advisor in this man's life has weighed in the same way. His accountant said the numbers travel with you. If this goes bad, it is your debt, your credit, your retirement. His wife said it gently. With love. We have our own kids to think about. We have to protect what we have built. And here is the thing you need to sit with. They are right. Every word of that counsel is sound. Nobody in this story is a villain. He clicks the pen, he puts it down, he calls his brother and says, kindly, with real regret in his voice, "I am sorry. I just cannot put the family at risk." And he hangs up, having protected everything he has. Remember him, exactly as he is at that table, decent and careful and correct, because 3,000 years ago, at a city gate in Bethlehem, a man made the same choice for the same sound reasons. And the Bible did something to him that it does to almost no one else in all its pages. It erased his name. The gate of an ancient town was not just an entrance. It was the courthouse, the notary, the marketplace of decisions. The elders sat there in the morning shade. Business was witnessed there, and a matter settled at the gate was settled. Period. So, when Boaz walks down from the threshing floor and takes a seat at the gate, everyone watching knows a transaction is coming. And here comes the nearer Redeemer through the morning traffic, right on schedule. And the text winks at us one more time with its favorite trick. Behold, the Redeemer came by. Of course he did. Her chance chanced upon the field of Boaz, and his path happened past the gate. And by now you and I both know what this book thinks of coincidence. Boaz calls out to him, and here is where the Hebrew does something wicked and wonderful. Boaz says, "Come over here, sit down," and then he addresses him with a phrase, Peloni Almoni. Your English Bible smooths it into my friend. But Peloni Almoni is not a name, and it is not exactly friendly. It is the Hebrew equivalent of hey. So and so, Mr. What's his name, the narrator, writing this account for all generations, deliberately reached into the story and removed this man's name and put a placeholder where a person used to be. Hold that. Do not ask why yet. The why is coming, and it will land like a hammer. Boaz gathers 10 elders of the town, a full legal quorum, witnesses enough to make anything stick. The court is seated, and then watch him work, because what unfolds next is one of the shrewdest pieces of negotiation in the Bible. A chess game in 2 moves. Move 1. Boaz presents the land. Naomi, he says, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring it to your attention. You are first in line to redeem it. If you will redeem, redeem. If not, tell me, for I am after you. Now freeze the frame and look through Mr. So-and-so's eyes, because from where he sits this deal gleams. A field, good Bethlehem ground, and attached to it one elderly widow with no sons. Do his math with him. Naomi is past childbearing. She said so herself on the road from Moab. Redeem this land. Look after the old woman for her remaining years. And when she passes, the field folds quietly into his own estate forever. Low cost, fixed term, guaranteed upside. He answers almost before Boaz finishes. I will redeem it. For one breath, everything Ruth risked at midnight is lost. The wrong man just said yes. Move to. Boaz turns the board around. On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, he says, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Feel the temperature drop at that gate. Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, young, able to bear children, and everything that fact does to the arithmetic, because now redemption means marriage, and marriage means a son, and by the custom of raising up the dead man's name, that firstborn son will not carry Mr. So-and-so's name. He will legally stand for Mahlon and a field, the very field so-and-so is about to pay good silver for, will one day pass to that boy. Back to the dead man's line, out of so-and-so's estate entirely. Run the new numbers. He pays the redemption price now. He feeds and houses a wife and her mother-in-law for years, and the asset he paid for walks away to another man's heir. Under the old math, he was buying a field. Under the true math, he is being asked to spend his own inheritance to resurrect somebody else's. And the nearer Redeemer looks at the cost, and he says the sentence that defines him forever. Then I cannot redeem it, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You take my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it. Read his reason again, slowly, because the Bible preserved it on purpose, lest I ruin my own inheritance. Not cruelty, not scandal. He broke no law and told no lie. It is precisely, word for word, the reasoning at the kitchen table. I cannot put at risk what I have built. It is prudent. It is defensible. It is what any advisor would sign off on. And now the hammer. This man, whose whole decision was engineered to protect his name and his estate, to keep his inheritance intact for people who would carry his memory. This man is the only significant player in the Book of Ruth whose name God did not keep. The elders at that gate knew his name. His children carried it. The narrator certainly knew it. And the scroll calls him Peloni Almoni, Mr. So-and-so. Forever, he guarded his name so carefully that he lost it. And the man beside him at the gate, the one about to spend real silver on a field that will never be his, to take a foreign widow into his house and raise another man's line under his roof. That man's name has been spoken aloud on every continent, in 10,000 languages, for 3,000 years, and will be read out in churches this Sunday morning. Boaz risked his inheritance, and God made him immortal. So and so protected his, and became a blank space. That is not a coincidence of history. That is a signature. In the economy of God, the surest way to lose what you are holding is to close both hands around it. The rest is ceremony, and the ceremony is wonderful. In those days, the text explains, a transaction was sealed by a man drawing off his sandal and handing it over, the ancient equivalent of a signature, the walking shoe standing for the right to walk the land. So and so pulls off his sandal, hands over his claim, and shuffles out of Scripture. And Boaz rises before the elders and the gathered town and makes it ring. You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion. Moreover, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that his name not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his place. You are witnesses today. Catch what he just did with her label. All book long. The Moabite has been the word this town used to keep Ruth at the edge of things. Boaz takes the label into his own mouth, at the gate, in front of the elders, and welds it into his wedding announcement. Ruth the Moabite, my wife. He does not launder her story. He marries all of it, out loud, on the record. And the gate answers him. The people and the elders call back a blessing, and listen to how high they aim it. May the Lord make the woman coming into your house like Rachel and like Leah, the two who together built the house of Israel, the gleaner from Moab, measured against the mother matriarchs of the entire nation, by the unanimous voice of the town that once only had a nationality for her name. So here is the truth of this fourth and final turning point. And after the gate, it barely needs saying, love that has not paid a public price is not yet commitment. It is still only feeling. At the threshing floor, in the dark, Boaz gave Ruth a promise, and it was beautiful, and it was still just words carried on night air. At the gate, in the sun, before 10 elders and the whole town, he put his silver, his name, and his future underneath those words where everyone could watch. Redemption always has an invoice. Always. The only question standing at any gate, ancien or modern, is who is willing to pick it up. And the counterfeit? The last one. The one I would tattoo on the doorpost of this generation if I could. It is caution wearing the costume of stewardship. Hear me carefully, because this one is subtle. Prudence is a virtue. The Bible praises it. And there are reckless men who should have listened to their accountants. But there is a caution that has quietly become a religion, a way of walking through your entire life with both hands cupped around what you have, blessing your own fear and calling it responsibility. Mr. So-and-so is it patron saint, and the terrifying thing about him is that he did nothing wrong. That is the point. You will not find a sin to name at that gate. You will only find an absence. A man who was offered a place in the story of redemption, ran the numbers, and passed. You can be completely legal, completely sensible, completely safe, and completely missing from the story God is writing in your generation. So here is the question, and I am going to leave it on your kitchen table next to the pen. What is your unsigned paper? The risk with somebody else's rescue inside it. The brother, the ministry, the kid who needs a home, the widow whose case is inconvenient, the yes that every reasonable voice around you has voted down. I am not telling you that every risk is from God. And I am not calling your advisors wrong. I am asking you this. 50 years from now, when the story of your family is told, and it will be told, do you want to be in it by name? Or do you want to be the careful relative in the background, the one they cannot quite remember, the so-and-so who ran the numbers and went home? The crowd at the gate breaks up. The sandal has changed hands. The blessing still hangs in the air. And there is going to be a wedding in Bethlehem. But before you go to it, stop and remember whose story this actually is. Not Ruth's. Not really. Not even Boaz's. This story opened with a woman standing at this same gate, holding up 2 empty hands, telling the whole town to change her name to Bitter, because God, she said, had emptied her out. The story owes that woman an ending, and the same women of Bethlehem who once stood in this street and asked, "Is this Naomi?" are about to gather around her one more time, look her in the eye, and tell her, in front of everybody, exactly how wrong she was about how her story ends. Do you remember the woman with the cardboard boxes? We met her at the very beginning of this journey, on the last morning, in a house that had already been sold. 2 funerals in 3 years, a roll of packing tape, and 1 box she never labeled, because she had no word for the part of her life that was going into it. She sealed that box the way you close a book you do not intend to finish, and we said she was certain, the way you are certain of gravity, that her story was over. That was 4 years ago. It is a Tuesday morning now. In the small kitchen of the apartment she swore she would never think of as home. There is coffee going. There is a car seat on the table, and in her arms, 3 weeks old, wearing a hat too big for her head, is a granddaughter who did not exist in any version of the future this woman ever allowed herself to imagine. Her son met somebody 2 years after the worst year. Nobody planned any of it. And now look at the camera looking at her hands. Because it is all in the hands. The same hands that pressed the tape down on that unlabeled box are cupped right now around a head the size of an orange. And they are full. Nobody warned her about this part of grief. That the story keeps writing itself after you stop reading it. She closed the book. The author did not. Now come back to Bethlehem, because Naomi's Tuesday is here. The text says it plainly. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And then comes a sentence I need you to slow down for, because it is quiet, and it is the loudest sentence in the entire book. The Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The Lord enabled her to conceive. Stop. Do you realize what you just read? Search this whole book, all 4 chapters, every scene we have walked through together. The famine, the graves, the road, the field, the threshing floor, the gate, and count how many times the narrator says God did something, directly, by name, in this verse. And in this verse alone. Everywhere else he stays behind the curtain. No voice from heaven picked Naomi off the ground in Moab. No angel walked Ruth into the right field. Her chance chanced. Remember, no fire from the sky moved Boaz, and no prophet showed up at the gate. 4 chapters of ordinary decisions, ordinary laws, ordinary kindness, ordinary courage, and then, at the one door no human hand can open, the door where life itself begins. The author steps out from behind the curtain and signs his name. He was in every chapter. He just declined to take credit until the last page. 10 years of empty cradles in Moab, and 1 verse in Bethlehem. Some of the things you have been calling delays were appointments all along. And now watch who the story hands the ending to. It is not Ruth at the center of this final scene. It is not even Boaz. The women of Bethlehem come back. The same chorus that crowded the street in chapter 1. The ones who asked, "Is this Naomi?" and heard a broken woman answer, "Call me bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty." That day they had no reply for her. Today they do. Today they surround her. And this time they are not asking a question. They are making an announcement. To her, over here, about her, praise be to the Lord. They say, who this day has not left you without a Redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth, better to you than 7 sons. You have to know what 7 sons meant in that world to feel the size of that sentence. 7 was the number of completeness, and sons were the whole architecture of a woman's security. So 7 sons was shorthand for the most blessed life imaginable. A full house, a guarded old age, the perfect hand of cards. And the women of Bethlehem look at Naomi, the woman who lost every son she had, and they point at a Moabite girl and say, "This one, the foreigner you came home with, the one nobody greeted at the gate that day. She outweighs the perfect hand." Do you see what they are really telling her? Naomi, you did the math wrong. You stood in this street and counted yourself down to 0, and the whole time, standing at your left shoulder, breathing hard from the road, was a treasure worth more than everything you were mourning. The empty audit is being corrected, line by line, in public, by the same crowd that heard it filed. And then the verse, this whole journey has been walking toward. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. Put the camera on her hands, the hands that buried a husband in foreign dirt, the hands that buried 2 sons, the hands she held up at the gate of this town as evidence. Exhibit A, in the case of Naomi against God. I went away full and came back empty. Those hands are holding a grandchild, and I want to be very careful here, because this story is careful, and cheap versions of it do real damage. That baby does not erase 3 graves in Moab. Obed is not a replacement for Mahlon. And this ending does not cancel that grief. And if you have buried somebody, you know no child ever fills another child's chair. The past is not deleted. Something better happens. The past loses its veto. Loss wrote the opening chapters of Naomi's story, and loss turned out to have no authority over the ending. Restoration does not mean the wound never happened. It means the wound does not get to finish the sentence. The neighbor women even name the boy, which tells you the whole town has adopted this ending as its own. They call him Obed, which means servant, one who works for another. A fitting name for a child whose whole existence is Hesed made flesh. And there the story could close. A rescued family, a fulap, a fed town, beautiful, complete. But the narrator is not finished, and what he does next. No other storyteller in the Bible does quite like this. He ends this tender little book with, of all things, a genealogy, a list of begats, and I know how eyes glaze at genealogies. So stay with me, because this one is a time bomb with a very long fuse. Obed, the text says, became the father of Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David. David, stop and let it detonate. The shepherd king, the giant killer, the psalm writer, the man after God's own heart, the greatest name in Israel's 1,000-year story. That old woman rocking a baby in Bethlehem is holding the grandfather of King David. And she has no idea. Nobody in this book has any idea. Naomi will die never knowing. Ruth crossed the border to keep one bitter widow company, and she was carrying a royal line in her future. Boaz paid at the gate to stop one dead man's name from vanishing, and he was underwriting the throne of Israel. They were just trying to save one family. They could not see that their faithfulness was load-bearing for a nation. And the fuse burns on. A full 1,000 years past David, to a tax collector named Matthew, sitting down to open his gospel with the legal ancestry of Jesus of Nazareth. 40-some generations, name after name after name, fathers begetting sons, and 4 times, only 4. Matthew breaks the pattern and writes a woman into the record before he reaches Mary. Tamar, a family scandal wearing a Canaanite name. Rahab, a prostitute from the walls of Jericho, the wife of Uriah, which is the record politely clearing its throat over David's worst chapter. And Ruth, the Moabite, 4 women any respectable genealogist would have quietly left in the drawer, and God pinned them into the birth certificate of his son, as if to make certain that no one in any century could ever stand at the edge of his story and say, people like me do not get written in. And one more thing, because the Book of Ruth keeps its best echo for last. Where does the gospel story begin? In Bethlehem, the same soil, the town whose name means house of bread, the town that was starving in the first verse of Ruth, the fields where a hungry foreign girl once bent her back for dropped stalks. 1,000 years later, those same hillsides fill up with shepherds staring at a lit-up sky. And in that town, a child is born who will grow up to stand in front of crowds and call himself the bread of life. The famine that opened this book gets its final answer in the same zip code. 1 millennium late, and right on time. So here is the truth that all 4 turning points have been spelling. 1 letter at a time. Faithfulness is not a way of controlling the ending. It is the courage to do the right thing while the ending stays hidden. Naomi stood up hungry and bitter, with no ending in sight. Ruth clung to a hopeless old woman, with no ending in sight. She walked into a random field, with no ending in sight. Boaz spread his wing at midnight and paid at the gate in the morning. And even he, shrewd as he was, could not see past his own wedding. Every one of them was writing in the dark, and the author took their small, stubborn, ordinary faithfulness and built a kingdom on it. So the question of this chapter is the hardest one in the whole journey, and I want you to answer it slowly. If the harvest of your faithfulness only comes up after you are gone, if the prayers get answered in your grandchildren, if the field you plant feeds people who will never know your name, is it still worth it to you? Take your time, because that is the actual contract. That is the exact deal, Naomi. Ruth, And Boaz signed without knowing they were signing it. Nobody in the Book of Ruth lived to see what their loyalty was really for. And they were the lucky ones. Because you, watching this, you get what they never got. You get to see the whole arc. Famine to dynasty. Empty hands to a full lap. In one sitting, which leaves just one question on the table. Tomorrow morning, in your kitchen, with your coffee going and your world unchanged, what are you going to do with a story like this? Stay with me 2 more minutes, because this last part is for you. It is tomorrow morning now. Your tomorrow morning. The coffee maker is doing its slow work, and the window over the sink is showing you the same street it showed you yesterday. Nothing out there moved overnight. Your famine, if you are in one, is still a famine. Your Moab is still on the map, and the graves in it are still graves. And this video did not change one fact on the ground. But the person standing in this kitchen does not have to be the person who stood here yesterday. That was true for a widow in Bethlehem, and it is true at your counter this morning. Look back down the road once before you walk out into the day. A bitter woman stood up off the floor of her ruined life with nothing to go on but a rumor of bread. And that unglamorous, unhealed, standing up turned out to be the hinge of history. A foreign girl welded herself to the one person on earth who could pay her nothing, and her loyalty outweighed 7 sons. A field got picked at random and turned out to be coordinates. A rich man spent his power as cover instead of leverage, learned a gleaner's name, and answered his own prayer with his own 2 hands at midnight. A sandal came off at a gate, and a careful man became a blank space, and a generous one became immortal, and a grandmother who had demanded to be called bitter sat in the sun with the future of the world asleep on her lap. Wrong about her ending in the best possible way. 4 turning points. And did you notice? Not one of them needed a miracle. They needed somebody to stand up, somebody to stay, somebody to walk into the field, and somebody to pay. Heaven handled the rest, silently, on schedule, signing nothing until the last page. So now the only question left is the one this whole journey was built to ask you. Whose hands are yours this morning? Some of you are Naomi. You renamed yourself somewhere along the way. It never went on a document, but it is on the inside of you. And you answer to it. Burden, failure, leftover, the one whose real life already happened. Hear this before you set that coffee down. In the entire Book of Ruth, God never once calls her Mara. The town heard the new name. The story wrote it down, and heaven never used it. Not one time. Your bitterness did not disqualify you either. Friend, Naomi was still bitter when Grace walked beside her through the gate. You do not have to feel hope to stand up. You just have to stand up. The feeling is allowed to come later. It usually does. Some of you are Ruth. You are in the clinging season right now, loving somebody through a long stretch that has no applause in it. The parent who forgets your name by dinner, the spouse in the depression, the friend whose grief has made them heavy to carry, and every reasonable voice around you says you have done enough. Take the words of Boaz in the barley field and put them in your pocket, because they were written down for you. I have been told all about what you have done. Nothing you did in that hallway at 6:45 in the morning fell outside the record. Heaven keeps books on the kindness nobody sees. and pays them off in its own currency, on its own calendar, with interest. Some of you are Boaz. You have a field. It might be a company, a classroom, a crew, a kitchen table, and somewhere at the edge of it, somebody is gleaning, working the margin, staying small against the wall. You do not need his acreage to do what he did. You need his eyes. Learn one name this week. Spend a little of your standing as shelter for somebody who cannot pay you back. And be careful, gloriously careful, what you pray over struggling people, because God is still in the habit of answering those prayers with the hands of the one who prayed them. And some of you, be honest now, are sitting where Mr. So-and-so sat. There is a paper on your table, a risk with somebody else's rescue folded inside it. And every number says pass, and every advisor agrees. And you have been protecting your inheritance with both hands for a long time now. Nobody is calling you a villain. He was not one either. Just hear the whole verdict before you decide. The man who guarded his name is the only one in the story who lost it. The gate is still in session this morning. The sandal is still on your foot. And the pen, as of today, is still in your hand. Here is the last thing, and then the road is yours. You were never promised a view of your ending. That was never the deal. Not for Naomi, not for Ruth, not for you. What you were promised is better. And the Book of Ruth is the receipt. An author who works entire chapters in silence and wastes nothing. Not a bent back in a barley field. Not a Tuesday visit nobody remembers. Not one stubborn, unfelt, unglamorous act of standing back up. It all turned out to be load-bearing. It always does. So look down at your hands, the ones you have been calling empty. A woman held up 2 hands just like them at the gate of Bethlehem and told the whole town her story was over. And she was standing in chapter 1 of the story they would still be telling 3,000 years later. Look again. Then go do the next faithful thing. And let God write the ending. He has done it before. He wrote it in Bethlehem,